Welcome to Lead Live, a conversation for ministry leaders by ministry leaders. I'm Josh Franks.
And I'm Clint Berry, and we're the co-founders of the Lead program. Today on the show, we're joined by Pastor Chris Knudsen to talk about transformational online environments. Hey, welcome into another edition of Lead Live. I'm Clint Berry alongside Josh Franks. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Josh, how's your weekend?
Weekend was good. Was good. I think people are tired. I'm tired. And a lot of people that I've talked to this weekend are just expressing, finally owning how tired they are of all of the changes and the differences and things like that. So how about you, man? How was yours?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Worked a little bit on Saturday morning, was able to unplug the rest of the weekend pretty well the most part. And so it was nice. It was raining a little bit here. And so we just kind of took some time to hunker inside and just kind of chill. So I feel pretty good at this point in the day. Yeah, I'm not as tired as I thought I would be, but there's a lot of work to be done.
That's definitely true. Here's some good news, though. Okay. I went to the dentist today.
Whoa. How was that?
So it was good. It felt very safe, and I was very happy that I went.
Well, good. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that they wear mask and glove anyway all the time.
Yeah,
so
yeah, they're used to it.
Normal. Yeah. I think it's when the grocery store person looks like a dentist that I kind of freak out a little bit. But it's good.
Yeah. So, or the dentist offers to take your toothbrush out to the car for you.
Oh, really? Okay.
No. They didn't.
I was going to say they just usually put it in a bag for me. Yeah, and then I have to carry it around. Josh, we have now been in this online environment for a couple of months now. I think you and I are getting more used to it. Do we want to do this all day, every day for the rest of our lives? I'm not there yet. But this online world and what you and I have found out over our time of running lead cohorts and different things is that there is a uniqueness about doing ministry online, but there are some challenges and barriers. And so I'm thankful for our guest today.
Yeah.
That's going to help us really engage with creating great online environments. So why don't we set up this conversation this way, is that number one, first, get rid of the word virtual out of your conversation, right? Because you're real, I'm real. The word virtual does not communicate how we're engaging with each other, right? And so I think that's something that we really do need. And then secondly, expect God to work in an online environment, right? I mean, The expectation of transformation is the same, in my opinion. So that should set up our conversation, but we're going to talk about online environments with our friend Chris. So let's welcome to the show,
That'd be great.
Chris Knudsen. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, fellas. Good to be on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, Chris,
thanks for being with us.
Yeah. Introduce yourself a little bit. Talk about, just share with us and our viewers who you are and what you're about.
Love it. I'm out in Denver, Colorado, with the MileHigh Vineyard. My wife and I moved out here about 14 years ago from Columbus, Ohio. So we spent the majority of our life in Columbus, Ohio, but now most of our family life is in Denver. So we've been out in Denver, Colorado. We've been with the MileHigh Vineyard for a good 14 years. My wife is on staff at the MileHigh Vineyard. I showed up on staff just a couple of years ago where I run an introduction to spiritual formation / discipleship program called Faith Walking. And so we've been doing that for our church personally has been doing that about 7 years. And I've been leading this for about 3 years, where we've gone to different churches all around the country. And then also in England, where we've introduced this program, this process to all different kinds of churches, starting off in their spiritual formation, trying to figure out how to get folks into a new discipleship or a new way of looking at their own spiritual formation. So it's been quite exciting. It's been a journey. It's been blowing up, which has been pretty exciting, but it's been all mostly online, with the exception of our 2-day retreat. Everything is online via Zoom, Google Classrooms. That's how we're mostly doing a lot of this process.
No, that's good stuff. I think when you and I were kind of preparing for our time today, Chris, one of the thoughts that I had was, all right, so what works in an online environment and what doesn't work in an online environment. So let's just start with the what doesn't work. So let's create a list for our viewers about the types of things that just doesn't work in an online environment. Let's start creating that list together.
Yeah, I think what you don't want to do initially with an online environment, or at least you don't want to think about your online environment as a way to transfer information. So just having in some ways it could be great, right? But if you're looking at a discipleship or transformational process, just transferring information isn't going to be great on an online environment because there are way too many distractions to sidetrack folks or to get people out of the picture. It's got to be involvement. It's got to be engagement. So you have to find some ways in order to get people into the material that you're trying to present or you're trying to offer up as different or new or something of that nature. So I'd say first and foremost, that's what we're looking for.
Okay. So within a small group environment, like what you and I and Josh are experiencing right now, you're saying content deployment where you do all the talking and we do all the listening. That's not the proper environment. So if you're going to load people up with information, then how do you do that? So if that has to be a separate something, then what something do you suggest?
So we have primarily gone with workbooks. So we have a workbook that we send out to folks that they read beforehand, and then they jump on a Zoom. And then we have a dialogue about what information did they read. And also there's homework within that workbook as well. And so what are you getting out of your homework? Are you trying on different kinds of conversations, and how are those conversations going? And so we're mostly, I wouldn't even say we're teaching to some degree, but we're mostly coaching folks in how they're showing up or what they're showing up, what struggles are they coming up with, and so forth. So I would say that's one. A workbook is one. Also, different kinds of videos I think oftentimes help. So it's like the flipped classroom kind of ordeal where you give someone the teaching first so that they can run through it, and then you jump on like a group like this. And then you go through, hey, what did you get out of the video? What did you see from the video? What are some different ways we can attack that? Or what are some different ways you can think about that? So videos are incredibly helpful as well. We've done different kind of book studies online where we have somebody read a book and come in and then we just coach to that as well. And most of the time we have a setup of what we want folks to do, like some sort of action that they'll take on. So they'll read a book, they'll take on an action, then they'll come back to the group, and then we'll coach through the group.
That's good.
That's good. Chris, I have a question for you about group size in an online environment. Say you're doing a web conferencing tool like Zoom. So I've been in Zoom calls that have, 50 people. And then the leader of the call is like, all right, does anybody have anything to share? And of course, Zoom protocol, you're waiting other people. And then when you talk, but you hear somebody else talk, you stop. And so everyone starts talking at the same time and then stops talking at the same time, waits for a minute, and then starts talking at the same time. So what's like the right amount of people to really have a interactive transformational online setting?
Yeah. And it really depends on what you're trying to get across, I think. So for instance, in a group like that, like let's say we do because we're with the way that things are, we can't actually meet for our original 101 retreats, which is what we were doing at different churches. And so now we're having to figure out I guess we should just take this online all the way. And so that would be a larger group. And so in those cases, we wouldn't actually do the who's got a question. You can type it into the chat bar if you'd like. But what we would end up doing is we would end up breaking those groups down into smaller groups, which you can on Zoom. So you can break them into 3 or 4 people in a group. And that's how we would do it. And then we would offer people questions to ask the whole group instead of just waiting for. And then, again, people can always ask questions, but I would probably have that facilitated through the chat bar. That way, and I could just take some time to read that and get that back to them. And then we have other groups where more information is being disseminated, and that might be like 15 people. And so that could be helpful, but again, it's helpful with the reading of the workbook, the homework, and then the questions. And then we have other forms where we'll actually only have 3 people meet together. That's where a lot of the transformation takes place. Because there you're not doing any kind of information dissemination. You're only there to ask questions of what did they get out of the work? What are you noticing out of these different Zooms? What are you getting out of the workbook? What are you getting out of your homework? So right around 3, if I could say that, it gives people an opportunity about 20 minutes to go through what are they seeing. That's really where a lot of the transformation is happening there.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I would say is been the most fruitful for us, is breaking each of those Zooms down and continuing to break them down until it gets to be about 3 people. And then people are more, I would say, and it's a practice of getting people to process a lot of this information out loud. And it's okay. It's being okay with the fact that you might be headed in a different direction than the workbook is, I would say, probably leading you. It might be that Jesus has you in a different place. But that's okay if a coach is able to coach in that direction.
Yep.
And I'm getting a little bit more into my process. So let me know if you have questions about that at all.
That's good.
So you have a big group, a medium group, a small group. How often do those groups meet? Like, is that 3 times a week that your folks that are in your process are in Zoom calls, or are they spread out throughout a month or season?
Yeah, so the way our second phase of our work goes is we start off with a 2-day retreat. And in the second phase, of which now we're trying to do online because of everything that's going on, we can't actually meet together. But the second phase is a 6-month-long process where we do every other week a group of 15 to 20 people. And every week we do a group of 3 people. So we have coaches that will volunteer to help people walk through the actual workbook and all their homework. And then every other week, we have a Zoom facilitator who's a subject matter expert to help people walk more specifically or more detailed through the homework, or at least give some expertise in terms of what the work is. So we have different subjects we want people to understand. We try to deliver that every other week. That's a group of 15. And again, our weekly group is only a group of 3.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
You know, we have fully embraced the flipped classroom model. And so to hear you say that, and, you know, out of a church discipleship and not like from an online school or something like that, is really refreshing. So let's say we're doing, you know, you're walking with us. Josh does the homework. I don't. I'm now coming and I'm ready for you to do what traditionally is done, which you download content into me and I sit, nod my head, and then discipleship has happened. So now Josh is ready. I'm not. How do you handle that from a leadership perspective in this group?
And this is normal real life scenario where I'm ready. Clint's not prepared.
And I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Yep.
This is a great question. And again, it's one of those within our process. So the way that we do our second phase of our 201, it's a 6-month-long process. And so you'll get people who are in various levels of, let's say, either spiritual development or just intellectual or cognitive development. And so some folks come and they're ready to go, and they're doing all of the homework. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're on board with everything. That just means they've done the work. And so the predicament that you're indicating is why we go to groups of 3 people. We have a coach for 3 people is because that coach can begin to ask questions to see, you know, maybe you did check mark all the boxes, but are you understanding the process and getting it and discipling and getting it into a place where this is actually being ingrained, it's actually being embodied. So not just are you reading the work, are you doing the homework, is it transferable throughout your life? Is it actually happening? That cannot happen, in my opinion. It's just more difficult to happen in that larger group space of 15 to 20 people that we do every other week. I can sometimes get there because I'll coach maybe 2 to 3 people out of the 20 or 15 to 20. That's not a lot of people I'm coaching in that moment. And I don't get to hear everybody's story. So even if I'm coaching those 2 to 3 people, I'm not hearing all of the roundedness of what's going on, as opposed to their weekly coach, someone that they're on the phone with on a weekly basis, who's spending at least 20 minutes at a time with them on a weekly basis, gets to hear a little bit more of their stories, gets to hear more of their hiccups, more of their troubles, more of their difficulties. Say they didn't get to do the reading, but they did take some of the work and actually apply it to their work-life situation. That's a big deal. That's a big win. That's a discipleship moment, where you didn't get to the homework, but you are taking some of this work that we're offering you and applying it to real life scenarios. And so we want to extract that as much as we want to extract the fact that you are doing the reading, you are doing the homework, and that's great. So we want it to be as applicable as possible. And at the same time, we do want folks to do the reading and do the homework, because that keeps up with rhythms and routines. It makes it easier to coach. So that's what I would say in terms of how we get there, is we get there through our coaches who are doing those weekly coaching calls and coaching people, about 2 to 3 people a week, asking them questions for about 20 minutes. Hey, how are you doing with this? What's this look like? And so forth.
Yeah, and the whole thing, whether I do my homework or not do my homework, is all of it is a discipleship, right, conversation. Like it's not just an academic process. This is a spiritual transformation. This is a holistic kind of move, right? So there are other stuff that's going on, like, oh, hey, there was a pandemic and I didn't get to read my chapters, right? Because I was trying to homeschool my kids. Okay, but you were able to do this teaching. How did you apply? Well, I did this, and this. When, right? I appreciate what you're saying there. So you're going to use to deploy content. You might use a Google Classroom. You might say, hey, check this video link out. We're going to process and talk through this. We're getting people into groups, kind of a large, medium, micro, in terms of that. So we're talking about what is not working, what's not working, what is working. So micro groups online is working. What else is working in terms of philosophy behind doing transformation online?
Yeah. So one of our philosophies is that, because we have volunteers who are coaching, who are engaging this transformational process with other folks, right? So our discipleships leading to disciples, and so forth. So how are we doing that? We have a framework that we think about this, which is to ask questions around awareness, ask questions around authenticity, and ask questions around action. So it looks like this. Because of the nature in what we're discipling toward at the moment, we're helping to build disciples based on first formation. So what do you notice about you not doing your homework, for instance? We offer that up as an example. When you don't do your homework, does that make you feel guilty? Does it make you feel shame? Is that what does that bring up for you? So we're asking questions of awareness. What do you notice about you not doing your homework? Because that's an interesting thought for some of us, especially for a coach, to hear more of the storyline of the person who's in front of them. So what do you know when let's say we go from this moment, you didn't do your homework and you felt shame about it, or you felt guilty about it? Did you take that out on someone? Did you go and release that anger and frustration and disappointment, or did it just make you sad, or did it just make you sort of spiral into sort of a negativity of like, I can't get anything done? That's just who I am. So how do you think about that? Our coaches are asking questions toward awareness. What are you aware of about your own self in these moments where you don't do the things that you want to do, or you don't do what you want to do in the ways in which you want to do them? And we would typically call this chaos, which is what's happening right now. Things that aren't happening the way that I want them to happen are it's chaos. It's chaotic. Like I can't go to the store when I want to all the time. Or I have to wear a face mask, or I can't take my kids because, certain restrictions and so forth, or I want to protect them in some way. So there's certain things that I don't get to do what I want to do, and that creates a little bit of chaos. And so that means that certain characteristics or attributes or just a functionality comes out of me. Certain habits come out, actions. So our coaches are asking questions of awareness. What are you aware of? What are you noticing? And then they're going to ask questions of authenticity, which I want to be very clear here, because being in a sort of a digital online world, you could say you're authentic when you say whatever you want on Facebook. which is, you could say that without any repercussions, without anybody coming back to you. So that's not what we mean when we say authenticity. What we mean by authenticity is, can you be responsible for your emotions, and can you be responsible for your thoughts? And so our coaches will ask questions about that. So if nothing else in your world changes, how might you want to change? What might you want to do differently? How would you want to show up? And so those are questions of authenticity. Once we become aware, then we can move into places of being authentic. And then from that point, we can actually move into places of action. So now what would it look like to go have a conversation with your neighbor, your brother, your coworker, or jump on the phone with mom or dad again and try it with a different perspective or a different angle? Now, this this framework of thinking of things through awareness, authenticity, and action, I think in my mind, as far as just in my own personal growth, this is what has led to a lot of transformation in my own life. I can't speak for everybody, but I see a lot of this happening for a lot of folks, is that as they become aware, they can take responsibility for that, and then they can move into a place of action that produces more fruit in their life, which is ongoing transformation for them.
That's good. Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying there. So what does it look like to train people to lead really great online digital environments? Like if they're going to lead a 6-month process, how are you training those who will walk alongside of these? Because I think this is what I'm hearing is, it seems like there's just a whole big tiered approach that's happening so that we do have great online environments. What's the training process look like for you guys as you're thinking about it?
Yeah. Most of the folks who are coaching for us have been through this process that I'm describing to you right now. So it's an ongoing, it's that literal discipleship, that master plan of discipleship, or master plan of evangelism way back in the day.
That's right.
That we all used to read. But so as we have gone through this process, and we've all been coached, so we've been through this 6-month ordeal, and then we jump into another course right after that. That's only 8 weeks. And then so from there, how we begin to train people is we begin to train people to ask questions like their coach has asked questions. And what kinds of questions that we're trying to get people to ask are not necessarily the right questions, because everybody thinks, I got to ask the right question. It's more or less the curious question. We want people to ask curious questions. We want people that when they're coaching someone else, we want them to lean in, to get to know the other person's story. And so it's not that you're helping someone build up their awareness, you're becoming aware of some of their gaps, some of their holes, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. So as you're asking questions, you're filling in your storyline, or I should say their storyline, but you're filling it in as you're asking them questions. That's really what we're trying to train, is to help folks ask the curious questions, help folks ask questions that lead to a place of learning or listening to understand. That's really where the training comes in to play for a lot of folks. And then outside of that, if we're doing Zooms in a much larger group where we're offering up we're more subject matter experts to that, I would say all we're doing there is increasing the experience. So what I look for when I see someone who might be available to do a Zoom, or a larger Zoom where they're teaching the material, is I want to hear more of your experience. Have you tried this on? What transformation have you seen come from your life? I want to see the fruit of all of that. So have you been able to move through these 3 pillars of awareness, authenticity, and action? What kind of action are you taking? Have you seen much fruit from that? So that's a lot of what I'm looking for in my more of my teaching folks, and then more of my coaches. I just want them to be able to ask curious questions.
That's great. If you're just joining us, we're with Chris Knudsen. He's on staff at MileHigh Vineyard in Denver, Colorado, and we're talking about how to create and foster transformative online environments. And so we've been talking about do's and don'ts of this, and you can catch the previous 20 minutes or so on the flip. But Josh, go ahead and ask another question, because I love where this conversation has been and where it's going.
Yeah, Chris, so previously to COVID, you guys did in-person weekend retreats, and then did your coaching or 201 and ongoing coaching in a online environment, correct? And since then, you've shifted your in weekend retreats to also an online environment. Is that correct?
We're hoping to, yeah. By the end of May, we want to go that route. So we, like most, we're just sort of figuring it out. We have never done it, but because the majority of our churches have canceled their 101s, we wanted to provide an alternative. So we are now going into an online retreat base, which we've not done, although everything after that 2-day retreat is all online.
Yeah. So as you guys have had some discussions, what are the things that you're excited about having the opportunity to do it online? And what are the concerns that you have, maybe the things that you feel like you might lose in the online environment?
Beautiful. You know, I think the online environment gets a bad rap. Simply because I think most people come into it thinking, oh, this is going to be impersonal. Like someone's not going to know me through this. And that's a real thought for a lot of folks. I think that there provides an opportunity, and someone not being able to see all your facial expressions or your body language. I think those are important. But I also think, like I'm saying, there's an opportunity for folks to be able to ask questions unbiased. Because I think a lot of times we see people sort of shift or move away, and we interpret that based on our past experiences. Oh, someone else did that to me and they didn't like me. Or we start to make up stories or tell ourselves a narrative about how someone engages us, which may or may not be true, but we engage that particular person in a personal setting, much like that. And so I think the online environment provides sort of this unbiased way of engaging one another, where in what I have found in our system is that we have people who will coach people they don't know. So I'll have people from Minnesota coaching people from Ohio, or Ohio people coaching people from Colorado. And the good news to that is this coach has no other agenda than to just be curious about you. That's it. So there's a beauty in being able to do things online where you can actually process without feeling like there's any kind of ulterior motive happening. Like if you were a part of someone who was part of your church and they were coaching you, that you might get the sense that they're trying to coach you into some leadership position, as opposed to just helping to disciple you into becoming a follower of Jesus. And so it's been a unique experience to be able to see the online environment engage people. I would probably say in an impersonal way, but that's been a blessing for a lot of folks because they haven't been, let's say, they haven't been like there've been no titles put on them. There's been no sort of necessary, let me pull you out of this, let me get you into this, or let me assume the worst of you, or let me put on these expectations of you. So there hasn't been any of that, which is great. I mean, there's always a little bit of that, but there hasn't been. It's been more neutral than I would say when you're in person with someone.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a really interesting interesting perspective that I hadn't thought about, as far as in person, maybe I'm reading people's facial expressions or body language in a way that projects some previous negative experience and prevents me from moving into closeness and understanding. I would think in the online setting, like I can't see your body language, so I can't see the whole thing. So maybe I do start assuming things, but maybe you're right. I actually thought of it like that. I've just got to kind of trust your words and your intonation a little bit more in the online setting, and maybe that puts us at a more honest interaction. So that's good. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. I think I've always appreciated coaching on the phone So I've never seen body language. I don't know what you're doing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you could be scrolling through something else and we're on the phone having a coaching call, but I am more intense, like in that coaching environment. Like I'm with you when, and I'm focused on you. Actually on the phone, I think even more so than I am here, and I'm even more distracted when I'm actually with you face to face. So it just seems strange, but yeah, I get how you have to work, But Josh and I, buddy, we were in a meeting earlier this morning. I loved talking with Justin this morning and just kicking around the concepts that we were. And yeah, would it have taken it up a level if we would have been in the same room? Sure, of course. But did the conversation diminish because we were in that online environment? Nope, because I've been replaying parts of that conversation all day long, and so there are these these pieces where we just can't connect all three of us in Ohio, in a day. It would shoot our whole day. But yet jumping into a Zoom meeting, have an hour-long conversation, jump out and back into our day again. Wow. So I appreciate some of that in terms of what I gain. But what else might a person lose, Chris, going from a physical environment to an online environment? Any other barriers or something that they would lose going from that physical to online, in your opinion?
I think they certainly lose a sense of social engagement and social interaction. I'm noticing this with my children because my children are now at home being homeschooled, and they miss their friends. They miss their social interactions, their social engagements. They miss, and this is the part of the online that is difficult. Is there's a part of you that comes out when you're in that sort of vulnerable situation. You're not practiced. You're just engaging someone in a social environment. It's not prepped. It's not prime. You're not getting anything out there. In some cases, you're just present. You're just engaged in the room. So much like what you were saying, sometimes you can be online and you can get done with what you need to get done. But then, what else? Like you're missing the part of, like for my kids, they're missing the jokes that they tell at school or the friends that they get to play around and hang out with. And it's nothing for them that they need to think about. It's just a part of their being. Of being expressed or being let go or being almost pushed out there because one friend brings this aspect of you out. And that's what's being missed. Someone is, there's an aspect of you that's not being brought out to its full capacity because, on a Zoom, it's always timed. It's, 60 minutes and we're done.
Yeah.
And so you can show up for 60 minutes for anything. But to just be in a space, it requires a little bit more. I think maybe attunement or maybe just identifying and noticing who you are and how you see different things in life. So most of all of our online is it's engagement. So it's all about how are you relating to other people around you. So all of our coaching and all the things we're doing is about how are you interacting with other people and what are you seeing and what are you noticing there. So
that's good. Yeah. And the passivity when you're doing an online environment is real, and the in the opposite of engagement, right? So the disengagement, the distraction, okay, well, I'm listening, and I put an earbud in and I walk away and I do something else, that's a real thing as well. And so for us that's why the engagement in an online environment, asking questions, keeping people engaged in the conversation is a good thing. If we're just disseminating or just listening, and it's not going to be, I'm not going to be up next, that I disengage and then boredom sets in and then a transformation goes down. So the more question asking, the more ability to engage, the higher the transformation. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah, and I would add this other one thought too, which is it's sort of an offset. Like you can either do it or do it. It's not really required, but it is that once you go through our process, you have an accountability partner. So not only do you have a teacher, not only do you have a coach, but we ask people to engage in an accountability person. Someone they can actually talk to, someone they can actually be with. And the folks who actually engage in an accountability partner of some kind, that I think outside of just their spouse, they do really, really well in their transformational journey as they engage more so. Because they can try things on. They can take this online environment and really apply it to their life, specifically with the accountability partner to say, hey, you should go try that with your coworker, with your friend, or with your neighbor, or boss, or someone else outside of this environment. But that accountability partner is huge for being able to try a lot of this work on that people feel a little bit more intimidated to try on. So I would say that's another, both and that we can think about with the online environment and transferring that into real life scenarios.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I hadn't thought about kind of the buddy system as you kind of going through there. I think I thought about my old school upbringing of what an accountability partner probably shouldn't be.
That's right.
But no, really kind of this 2x2 as we're going on the journey together, that we have camaraderie for the journey. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that's good. Upbringing of what an accountability partner. So, Chris, what else do we need to be thinking about in terms of this online environment? What are the other, we thought about what doesn't work, what does work, flipped classroom. What are other
Chris,
pieces?
I actually have a question about like leading more than 3 people. So if you're moving towards engagement, there is going to be some process of communicating in a larger group. You're trying to get information across, but when you do ask a question and you want some type of response, what's your experience and your thought on that? Should you just leave it open-ended? Should you be more directive and call on an individual like Clint? What's your thought on this? What do you think works best in an online environment?
For me, I call on folks. I know I have different facilitators, different teachers that will do different things. And they'll leave it sort of open for people to chime in. I think on Zoom, they have that little raised hand thing you can do.
Yeah.
So different folks do it differently. I like to call on people personally. Now, I think it depends on your expertise. It depends on what you're comfortable with. If you feel comfortable enough to work with people right where they're at, that's what I do. I just call on people and I just say, just tell me where you're at. Tell me what's going on. And what are you noticing? What are some of the hiccups? And maybe you're not on this particular chapter that we're in. Maybe you got stuck a couple weeks back. So let's talk about that. Where are you stuck? And so I like your question. Typically, I think it allows me more time to call people. So if I can call on someone, I can start coaching them, and then I can call on someone else. It alleviates the 30-second to 60-second awkward pause where we're just sort of waiting for someone to chime in, and then it's usually the same person who's chiming in because they feel comfortable talking in a larger group. And so I try to think about who have I not heard from in a while, and I want to hear from them. And but I do offer up this preface to say, you can tell me that you don't want to chat right now, that you're in process, that you're thinking about some of this, and you don't have to actually talk. But I want to call on you and see if you do want to. And if you do, and you want to tell me where your week's at, I love that. But if you don't, you should have the freedom and the say so to let me know that you're in process. You don't want to talk right now, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I was thinking about that. The people that are always more than happy to be the first one to chime in certain group environments, and thinking about how people are heard. Just this morning, I was thinking about it. Like, external processors feel heard when their ideas are expressed, not necessarily when they know the person they've expressed them to has actually validated or responded to. Like, as soon as I get my idea out there and I express it, I feel heard by you. So that's just a real interesting thing. And internal processors are different than that. They're they feel heard when their ideas are received or validated or something. And so they're, of course, internally trying to, how do I most clearly communicate this so it can be understood by the other person? And so realizing that you do have different types of people in your online environment, is so good. And I really do appreciate, Chris, that your posture is, hey, I'll call on you, even if you're not ready. Even if you're ready, but you're not quite ready to put it out there. Your posture towards those folks is a really cool thing. So that's a good thing for us to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Chris, let's say we're going to get into a brand new group, and this is a brand new season of online ministry, small groups, discipleship methodology. So we're going to start up. What role does like expectations play, and just kind of ground rules, and not so much like what is the Zoom decorum anymore, but when it comes to an online discipleship process, or at least how we're going to meet, how we're going to discover is going to be online. Maybe the information is still the same, but the methodology of how we're meeting is different. But how would you set up a brand new group in this online medium, and specifically lay out, like talking to Josh and I about the expectations for how this thing is going to run? Could you just like kind of role play your way through how to set this up so we have good expectations?
Yeah. For me, one of the very first things that I'll say, which goes back to the question we were just talking about with Josh, is this: I want to set up the expectation that in this group, in this online environment, we're not looking to shame one another. We're not looking to make each other feel guilty or to judge one another. So the very first thing that we want to set up initially is a safe space. This should be a safe space for you. And so going back to the thought of, does this require, because with an online environment, again, with only 60 minutes, a lot of information could be disseminated from one to another. It can happen very quickly, and people may or may not be ready for that to be able to offer up their thoughts. And some people might get a little, they might trip up on some of their words and getting out some of their thoughts. And so even helping them to process some of those thoughts. I want to create a safe environment. And if they don't have an availability to, or I shouldn't say an availability, but if they don't have, let's say, all the work caught up, I don't want to shame them in that environment and make it so that, hey, if you didn't check mark the box, then you're in trouble, type of thing. That would ruin all of my online experiences. If I did that from any one of my Zooms, no one would want to talk. So I want to create a safe environment from the get-go. And then the next thing I want to be able to establish is what's the group going to look like. We want to have some teaching, but we don't want to do all of the teachings in our Zoom calls. Like, I want to start off with doing some coaching, some large group coaching. And it does a couple of things for us, right? Like, I won't be able to get through everybody, but doing some large group coaching actually allows other participants to hear their process through someone else. And if I've done my job of creating a safe environment, then people could feel safe talking about relatable items to our workbook, but maybe not, they might not be where we're at in the workbook. And that's okay. I can help them through a process, and that process, so I get two things done here. I'm helping somebody to get caught back up, right? And at the same time, I might be offering another process for someone else to see themselves. I mean, that's what large group coaching does, is it allows a mirror to be pointed back at you to say, hey, you see this process, you might be going through this process. This might be you. You probably ignored this, or maybe you've ignored this 2 weeks ago, and you just wanted to get through the workbook, or you wanted to get through the reading, or you wanted to get through the homework, and you ignored this process. Well, this person's bringing it back up for you. And so that's great. We can see ourselves through this. So we'll do a little bit of that, and then we'll do a little bit of teaching, but I'll also offer up a practice at the end of my Zoom. So I also think that's important too, something that we can all do together. That will be nice, quick, and easy. It will be just a way of all of us engaging in interaction. So some practice, and this doesn't have to be actionable per se. The practice that we offer would be more of, I would say, contemplation or guided meditation of some sort. And it's simple. It's like 10 minutes, or maybe it's a writing exercise. Hey, I want you to write out 5 minutes of what you heard. And then let's come back and see if we're on the same page, or see if we can learn from one another. And so those kinds of things are the expectations that I'll set up from the get-go of my online experience, and what I want people to experience as well. I want them to experience a little bit of that large group coaching. I want them to experience a little bit of teaching from subject matter experts, only because I think we can extract a few big points. And then also I want everybody to practice something. That way we're all doing it together. And in actuality, you do hit a lot of the different, as we were talking about, there are some people who are external processors, some people who are internal processors, and you sort of run the gamut with doing each of those three things. You get people who actually just need to slow down and hear the material in their own mind, as opposed to going to the next thing.
That's right.
So we're trying to catch everybody into these online environments. And we're identifying, hey, everybody's a little bit different in how they're coming into these online environments.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, to be able to set up and just again, outline, and of course you've probably been doing some pre-work with every participant. Yeah. Hey, there's going to be some homework. But that's where the content is. If you're not ready, to download that into your brain and to wrestle around with it on your own and then come prepared, then you're going to feel very left out, right? And so we don't want that. So do your very best to get all of that ready to rock, so that when you come in, you can participate and you can receive and you can help teach others, because we are aware that when we teach other people, our retention is the highest, right? This is why preachers love to preach. They do all the work of the study. They do all the work of the preparation, the interpretation. They're applying to themselves, and now they get to apply to others. Of course, they are going to be the leader in retention. Right. Whereas if I'm just hearing it, I only can remember 24 hours later, if I was given a quiz, about 10% of what I've heard. All right. So we jump to 90% when we teach other people. And so that's one of those other transformative elements of an online environment, is that when I teach another person, I learn and I process and I engage, but then I can also be course corrected if I'm off track by, like what you're talking about, Chris, like a good coach to ask further questions. So if I'm out in the weeds, the coach is able to bring me back again. I think that's really good. The other thing that I loved was the parallel learning, or the parallel processing. This is why testimonies are so powerful, is that Chris shares what God is doing in his life. I can identify with Chris, and now I'm actually parallel processing with him. But when he comes to the pinnacle of the story, I'm going, wait a second, I haven't hit that mountaintop yet. What? Oh, wait. Oh, maybe that could be my mountaintop too. So parallel processing is a big deal. So I love that group coaching idea that you gave to our leaders. That's awesome. I like what you're saying. It's good. That's good. Hey, we've got a few people watching, popping in and out. If you do have a question for Chris, we're going to start to wrap up our conversation this afternoon. But if there is something that you wanted to ask a question of Chris concerning, go ahead and pop that into the comment section. We'd be glad to hit that before we jump off today. But Chris, tell us a story about a transformation that you're seeing in this digital environment. I mean, you've had not just the pandemic, you've had a long run here of coaching people. I mean, is there a story that the Lord brings to mind of someone that you've been walking along with, a story of transformation that you could share with us and with our viewers while people are still processing maybe their question? And then after that, we'll roll into final thoughts if we don't have anyone asking questions today. But is there a story of transformation that you could share with us that maybe comes to mind?
Yeah. There's a few of them, and I'm going to mention a little bit of just go a little bit further into our process so that this would help tremendously. And so I've mentioned already sort of the beginning. You come into this process through a 2-day retreat that we'll set up. And then from there, you'll go into a 6-month online process. You'll do Zoom, you'll do either calls or Zoom again with a coach who's on there with 3 other people besides you. And so that's a 6-month ordeal with a workbook and homework and so forth. From there, you go into another course to help drive some of this material home a little further. And then what we do is we take those people who have finished the second part, the second phase of that, of our process, we pull them back around and help them to become coaches. And so that's really the discipleship process. And so the story, which is, I have lots of stories of this, but as people become coaches, they really do learn to listen, to understand. They learn to be patient, they learn to observe, and they learn to become curious. And that's a part of what you were just mentioning here, Clint, which is the idea that when you can actually ask questions like a teacher, you embody it more so. 90% of it becomes ingrained. And I tell people going through the 201 as a participant, you might get 10%, only 10% of this work you might ingrain. If you become a coach, you'll get the full 90%. Yep. So I just wanted to reiterate that. That was a great thought that you have. That's a part of our discipleship process of what we're trying to get folks to do, is to move through this and then come back around and become a coach. Now, for me, I would say this is really where it started to shine for me, is as I became a coach, I'm starting to ask questions. Now things are starting to become clearer to me. And I'm starting to understand how to engage others. And so I remember in particular, my wife and I, we had started going to a gym. And I remember just sitting there asking these folks questions, our gym owners, just asking them questions about their lives. Tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. How'd you grow up here? And what did you think about that? And in all honesty, I didn't think I was doing anything. I just thought I was, just asking questions. But this was such a different way for me to live my life, was to ask questions. And it just felt so natural and so smooth, so easy. And turns out that they actually needed a lot of help in life. And we were the ones who were there at the right time, at the right moment, asking the right kinds of questions, asking curious questions, really listening to understand and getting into a depth with them. That they started to share that their marriage was on rocky grounds, and that it was at sort of the tipping point where they didn't know if it was going to last. And so we just brought them in a little closer, asked them a few more questions, brought them into the church, and brought them into a group. So I actually brought them into this process. It was a pretty intense process to start them off with, but they wanted those questions to be continued to ask of them, and they wanted to continue to learn and continue to grow. And so through this process, we've actually seen people meet Jesus. Those two people did not know Jesus. And just through asking questions, they opened themselves up to the person of Jesus through our church, and through, again, going through this process. And it was wonderful to be able to see, again, not just the, hey, come to church on Sunday, because that wasn't enough for them. Yeah. Like I said, they were on rocky ground, so they really needed, they really needed some, like we're talking about, some discipleship, and some relationship. Mm-hmm. And they needed people to walk them through this process. And that's what has made the difference, I think, for us and for many of our folks, is that they've learned to walk alongside people. They've learned to not just bring them into church, but how to ask questions. Yep. How to ask questions to keep their journey going and moving forward. And you do that without condemnation. I remember showing up to church for the first time and feeling like, what do I have to do? I have to do that? Why do I have to do? But just simply through relationship and through asking questions, these folks were able to come into a life with Jesus. And we've seen this countless of times with people who have been able to learn how to be curious, listen to understand, be patient, be observant, and just walk with people through their transformational journey. So,
that's good.
Yeah, that's as short as I can make that without all the details going into it. But that's been one of the most enriching stories for me going through this. Was it just allowed me to be different, allowed me to show up differently. Whereas before I might have said, hey, you need to do this, or hop onto this thing, or, without actually asking any questions.
Yeah. And I think what Josh and I say often is, when people do what they discover, and that's what a great question is able to do in the life of any person, is if we can ask a great question that makes them stop in their tracks and just consider first, but then discovering awareness, discovering that next action step, discovering a piece of authenticity, like you've been sharing with us today. That is actually going to catapult them along because I do what I discover, right? Because if it's just, oh, you need to do this and this and this and this, well, that's your thing. That's not my thing necessarily. One of our team members actually shot a question. So I'm going to post this out for everybody. And the question is this: how do you engage with people who are skeptical of the online platform for discipleship? So Chris, I would love for you to try to tackle that question as we come to the end of our conversation today. How do you engage with people who are a little skeptical of the online thing?
Yeah, like I said, you would want to be able to understand what are their concerns. Why are they so skeptical of the online environment? Is it because they feel shame around technology? Like they've tried technology before and it just hasn't worked out for them? And so what are some of those barriers that you can begin to remove from some of the skeptics who are thinking about online, but really it's been something that they've never navigated through, or if they've have before, they've always ran into trouble at some point in time or another. So just hearing someone's story about why they're so skeptical within the online environment, and then to walk with them along. Well, let's try this out. Yeah. Like, what would happen if you were to open up this now? What would happen if you were to click this link? What would happen if you and I just jumped on a Zoom real quick and we went through all of the different buttons and all of the different things that were, freaking you out to some degree? And in most cases, we're able to circumvent a lot of that skepticism just through the stories that have been told. And so a lot of people, we've done a lot of vulnerability through online environments, and we'll say it's not the best, but it does work. Yeah, and I think that's because of the receptivity of the folks who are involved and those who are in it. And so that's the other thing I would say too. Hey, if you're gonna do it, like really do it. Like don't jump in with a skepticism. You could be skeptical and say what you're skeptical about. But when you do it, let's do it. Like, let's jump in, let's play ball, let's make this happen. So that's what I would say to the folks who are built in that way. Because it doesn't do any good once you're in it to continue to have those fears or those hangups. You're always going to be stuck then.
That's right. Now, Josh, what would you add? That was a beautiful answer. But what else, a word of encouragement for those who are still kind of like, I'm skeptical about the whole online thing. I'm not really sure if it's going to work. What else would you offer?
I don't know if I have too much to add to what Chris said, to be able to walk with people and to ask, what's kind of the heart behind the skepticism. What are you afraid of? Fear is usually what brings, up skepticism or anger or something like that. Yeah. So I think that's a really, really great question. Maybe you share your online experience a little bit with them and how it's been impactful to you, but I thought it was really good.
Yeah, really, really good. I think I would just lean into also with that person to say, listen, the Holy Spirit is everywhere present. Let's be reminded of our theology. And just because you and I are not physically present in the same room doesn't guarantee that transformation will happen, right? But we do rely upon the Holy Spirit who does guide us. And so whether we're meeting online or in person, it doesn't really matter. The Holy Spirit is going to do what he does. And what he does do regularly in all of us is to make us more to make us like Jesus. That's what his whole goal is. And so we can play ball with him or we cannot, but he's okay with it, right? I mean, so I think that's something to lean into, especially in this online era, as we are now from here to everywhere, all in the same shot, trusting that the Holy Spirit is going to show up and do what he does all the time, every day. That's right. What he loves to do. Guys, let's start to wrap up our conversation. So Josh, I'll let you go first. Take away, final thought from our conversation about online transformative environments.
Yeah, I think one of the things I appreciated Chris sharing was a tactical piece, and that is that you're going to adjust how you're going to lead in your online environment based on the size. Not every size group can accomplish the same thing, and so make sure you're really intentional with who you're inviting to what online environment in order to get the results that you're shooting for. Smaller leads to more intimacy and transformation. Larger tends to rely on a singular or duo of communicators in order to get some information across. Neither of them are bad. You just need to make sure that the outcome that you're shooting for lends itself to the right online environment.
That's good. Chris, the same to you. Final thought on our conversation today.
Yeah, I just want final thought. The online environment is not the only thing. So if we think of it as the only thing, then yeah, we're going to be stuck. The online environment doesn't have to hinder your ability to connect with or be in community with other people. It can actually enhance it as long as it's not the only thing. And so as long as we have a means for which we are connecting with the people outside of us, then the online environment is going to be a huge tool for helping us get there.
I think the final thought for me today, guys, is our reach and discipleship is ever growing. And so now I'm not contained in my faith community or my church environment or even my community. Now God can use me to engage with a person that is around the world. Maybe I speak a certain language and they don't have any believers in their town. We could still have a transformative environment for them. And we could just have to play with the time zones perhaps, or just the geography is kind of stripped away in this environment. And so for me to be intentional, asking good questions, and connecting well, yes, through a camera, yes. But also our reach is different. It's a whole lot bigger than it was even 3 months ago, 2 months ago. And so I would just say, consider this digital online environment as a transformative method. However, not maybe ideal from physical environments. Hey, it's pretty darn good. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Chris, thanks for joining Josh and I today on Lead Live. We really appreciate you jumping in and your consideration, your thoughtfulness. That's my takeaway from our conversation and getting to know you today. Thank you very much for your ministry. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, my friends. It's good to be with you guys.
Thanks.
So, hey, Josh, we'll see you again on Thursday. We've got David Jones is joining us. He's the author of the book A.B. And so we're going to talk about A.B. Simpson and his life, but also kind of measuring and monitoring when A.B. Simpson encountered crisis and how he led through it. At the very end of his life, Josh, the Spanish flu hit in 1919. And that was the very end of his leadership. Didn't have a lot going on. Still the president of the Alliance, but super old. And so didn't do a whole lot there, but multiple crises happened, everything from virus to war to everything else. But it'll be a fantastic conversation on Thursday, talking with David at 4 p.m. Eastern here on Lead Live.
Definitely looking forward to it. We've both enjoyed reading David's book, and we've gotten to hang out with him a couple of times, and it's always so much fun. We learn so much, and just really, really looking forward to Thursday. So if you can join us, we'd love to have you Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time.
Hey guys, have a great rest of your afternoon, and leaders, we'll see you soon.